Absolutely delighted to welcome to the stage Mark Beckwith from the Financial Times. He's got a really interesting story to tell us about a live project that's underway with a few challenges. Mark.
Thanks, Daniel. Really happy to be here. Also, I hope I can do as good a job as the previous presenters. Explain maybe why I'm here, actually. And I put this slide together last week, and I thought two things. First of all was, wow. Actually, I used maybe a slightly more choice word there in terms of how long my relationship with ArcCubed has gone back almost 20 years. And the second thought I had was, Daniel, I think you possibly need to, we've talked a lot about loyalty today. Maybe you need a client loyalty scheme, and maybe I might qualify for a gold card in that regard. But just to kind of whistle stop also, back, I had to guess here, I think it was around 2005, 2006. I'd been at the post office about 2 or 3 years, and we brought the ArcCubed team in there. Post office at that point had started getting lots of really rich customer data, having started selling kind of insurance, telephony, travel products. Prior to that, a lot of our customers were anonymous to us. They were kind of over-the-counter transactions. Suddenly we found ourselves with all of this data, and someone had the bright idea, well, we should put all that in a single customer view, shouldn't we? So we can kind of see who's buying what, and you were talking earlier about kind of average products per customer. I seem to recall we kind of got to about 1.2. But we kind of, data everywhere, didn't really know what to do with it. So the ArcCubed folks came in and started mining that, understanding where the opportunities were for cross-selling products, just understanding profiles of people who were buying those different products, whether it was over the counter, through the call center, or online. And fast forward to 2010, I joined Domestic and General, who, if you haven't heard of, they are, got sold to me as kind of one of the biggest companies you've never heard of. So I joined, I think, at the time where ArcCubed had just started working with Domestic and General, and we ended up implementing about 80 different propensity models across various different campaigns, with the aim of cutting out a huge amount of mailing volume. Domestic and General sent out so much direct mail, they actually had their own mailing house, and spent a lot of money on mailing. So cutting out circa, I think, 20% of that mailing volume resulted in a massive amount of savings. I think we targeted about no more than 5% loss of planned sales, ended up being about 1 point something, I think. So really, really positive, washed its face really well. So then I joined the FT. And for several years, as Daniel will know, trying to find that right project to get the ArcCubed folks in to help us with. And last year we found it. I've got a short video here courtesy of our PR team, which gives you a flavour of how our coverage is helping people across the world to make better decisions through understanding what's going on in the world today.
This is a time of shocks.
What is changing today?
The disruptions of their supply chains.
Grappling with soaring costs and stuttering growth.
Profits are still high.
And now jobs are going.
The warning lights have been flashing.
2 million mortgages.
As consumers pull back on spending.
And now the ripple effect rippling all the way across.
What can and should be done?
So I'll give you a little bit of background about data at the FT. So somewhat big-headedly, but I think this is true. We've been quite pioneering in the publishing sector in terms of our data capabilities. And when we were acquired by Nikkei, actually, a lot of the press releases at the time, internally and externally, called out the FT's data capabilities. And in the almost 10 years since then, there's been a huge amount of collaboration between the FT and Nikkei. And in the data space, much of it from the FT to Nikkei in terms of them building on their own capability, learning from what the FT does. We have a 60-plus strong data team, presence across the globe, primarily in the UK, but also in Bulgaria and the Philippines. And that team covers data science and machine learning, data and AI governance, BI, analytics and insight. We're definitely on a growth trajectory. So in terms of customer marketing and what's been changing in the last 2 to 3 years, quite a few things. So we've moved to a new tech stack. We've brought together a lot of our data into one place as well. We used to have our subscriptions data over here, and then we'd have our events data. So we have an events part of the business called FT Live. FT branded. From the outside looking in, you might think it all is kind of the same thing. Absolutely not. We've only just brought that together. And what that means is we have more people accessing more data, which is great. But obviously, we know there's some potential downsides to that. And this is where, in bringing all of that together and all those processes and teams together using the same data with the same tech stack, we've seen maybe being kind of sort of variability in terms of the practices that are applied to that data across the business through that additional demand for that data. And what that's done is really solidified the role that contact governance team, as they're now called, has in terms of creating those guardrails and applying the governance over that data. So we did all of that, and then we kind of figured there was some quite chunky big problems for us to solve. And knowing R-Cubed and knowing what they do, I knew they were perfectly placed to help us with that challenge. Although it's kind of the thinnest slither in this, this insight and planning section at the top was really key. They said, we listened. They said, this is really important. We need to put a lot of effort in here. Find all the data that is relevant. As we've seen in some of the other presentations, trying to pull together all of the data and that's maybe dispersed across the organisation to come up with that smart framework, and then test and learn framework thereafter. We were maybe a little bit impatient and we wanted to move a little bit faster, but knowing their credentials and that they were saying this was important, it was important, then we stuck with it. And so what we found, emphasis on the we, a quick point here and kind of conversations that I had with Kate and with Daniel was, I made it quite clear from the outset I wanted this, and R-Cubed were absolutely on the same page here with us, and in that I wanted this piece of work to be a true collaboration. If I rewound to my days at the post office, that project with them was one of the kind of highlights of my time at the FT and actually of my career, being able to sit side by side with the R-Cubed analysts and really get under the skin of the data and learn how to tackle a project I got a huge amount of value for when I was in that analyst role. So I wanted that exact same experience for my team at the FT and working really closely with them. And now there's 3, 4, even more of the team working day to day with the R-Cubed team. It's a huge benefit, and I'm sure it'll benefit them into their future career. We were finding we were routinely targeting in certain areas of the business people who had received 100+ emails and hadn't clicked on any of them. I mean, it sounds like it's not rocket science, but it was happening. So what's coming next? So given what I just said in terms of us routinely targeting people who with that level of disengagement, we're on the cusp of executing a test, this leap of faith test, where we're going to just cut out that volume across the board. There are some legal and compliance communications that we need to send to customers, for instance, if they're renewing and we're going to be renewing them onto a higher rate. We need to tell people about that. We'll get some grumpy people calling us up if we don't do that. But in terms of any marketing engagement type comms, we're just going to cut those out and see what happens. And, going back to that deliverability point, I'm massively confident we'll be able to demonstrate not just the fact that we're not just not communicating to those disengaged, but actually we see a positive uplift on those where we do see engagement. Given all of that data in one place, lots of people all clamoring from it, we do run the risk of finding ourselves in a bit of a Wild West situation. And so, the work that the team have done for us will help us try and really emphasize the need for that governance and that those guardrails. We implemented quite recently a safety net capability, which kind of prevents that over contact. If everyone's clamoring after that same data at the same point in time, we were able to kind of limit that and kind of reduce the risk of that Wild West situation. Hearts and minds, I think at the FT, what we like is evidence and more evidence, and not just evidence from the past, but looking at testing that in live activity. So I'm just going to ask Kate up to the stage to give you a little bit of an overview about how we're going to try and do that.
So after lots of lovely pictures, I'm here to start showing some numbers. So apologies, it's my role to bring it back down. Yeah. So as Mark said, I think one of the original great ambitions of this project was to optimise all your contacts, make sure the right message goes to the right people, and stop the Wild West scenario of who's going to mail who. So it started off with the data, as it always does, and it started off with quite an intensive audit of all email activity, understand best practice, who is targeting who, different requirements on emails. So we have an events organisation that really are targeted by volume and don't want to miss an opportunity to sell a spot that once time's gone, you can no longer sell it, versus more of a subscription type of business where you can build engagement over time. So having compiled all of that, we realised we were a few steps away from optimising who should get which message and which campaign, because there was some other stuff going on that needs to be tackled first. Taking all the data, we very simply segmented the base into some engagement groups in terms of how they engage with past emails across everything. So we have from the very highest to the very lowest. There's the distribution of customer groups, top 20% down to the bottom 13%. Then we looked at how many of the total clicks those segments were generating. So unsurprisingly, our very top engagement group generating the majority of our clicks, down to our little group at the bottom, 13% generating just 3% of the clicks over the period. I think it was 3 months. So those guys are driving most of the clicks. But obviously for key parts of the business, there's pressure to chase all possible clicks. Email is seen as low cost. If there's a drive to maximise the number of clicks, well, let's keep emailing these guys because it's very cheap and the campaigns are going out anyway. We looked at, this is the number of distribution of emails that were going out to each of these segments. So our low engagement group, and these are the guys that Mark referred to, potentially received 100 emails and hadn't clicked on any of them. They simply weren't engaging. They're receiving 18% of all the emails being sent. So some of the question, again, trying to feed evidence back to various parts of the business, it's like, well, so what? And the key, some parts of the business, if this is low cost to send out, and we're getting 3% of the clicks, it's worth it, because even one click might be worth that additional, conference booking. Yes, but, the next stage really, at the very top, obviously these guys are engaging. We need to ensure optimum frequency and content to maintain engagement. And that's a key part of this project, to make sure we know which parts of the business should have priority and to maintain that engagement and protect them at all costs. And with these guys, as engagement's going down, again, how do we drive increased engagement with these customers? What's the tone of voice? And again, which business areas should be contacting to maximise engagement? And then these guys, well, the question here, and the big one that we've had to tackle as part of this project, at what cost does contacting this end of the base come? And at what impact is it having on deliverability to all? And going back to Mark's point that the high email volume and low engagement to these guys was basically reducing deliverability to the guys at the top. So simply major email campaigns were ending up in junk email. So it really was a case of getting less from the very, very best. And that was quite an important piece of learning, I think, across all the teams, to say we need to sort this out, because it's not a case of now focusing on volume of emails, it's maximising those number of clicks. And in this case, less is going to be more. Mark referred to the leap of faith test, because this is one example we can't do an A/B test. You can't get the gains up there without stopping at the bottom. So that's starting. And we showed the teams the incremental would be required to balance it out, and it is actually tiny, and it's going to be better practice, and then we can refine. Then alongside this, we are building the frameworks to make sure the right messages are going out to the right people who know which campaigns should be prioritised to which customer group. So in terms of what's next, this is where we focus now. The quick wins to optimise current performance and deliverability, which is all about cutting out the rubbish, the guys that are dragging down the deliverability, to make sure all the campaigns are working as effectively as possible. And with that, bring in the evidence, because everyone needs to understand that. It is a leap of faith to say this is what we've achieved just by reducing volumes. You are actually getting more across the board. So we need to deliver that insight with absolute clarity. And then the work that's going on alongside this, we're identifying those key cohorts in terms of which customer cohort should be prioritised for which type of campaign, which will be a fundamental part of the framework going forwards to stop again the fighting over key groups. And then we'll move into the framework build. So we'll have efficient campaigns going out with customers segmented in terms of where they are on the customer journey, where they need re-engagement campaigns, and the others to make sure we maintain that engagement by the key customer groups. And it will evolve. There'll be test and learn. And the nice thing is we're working alongside Mark's team to make sure that happens.
Just to round off, as Ron says, optimization, definitely a big deal, especially at the FT. We have a massive appetite for testing and learning, not just in this space, but across all of our capabilities. This isn't just about kind of carrying on doing the same as what we've always been doing and kind of trying to cut out some volume. It's about trying to understand how can we do things differently, thinking about being very much more customer focused and embedding into that framework a way in which to change what we're doing and focus on different things that we want our customers to engage with at different various points in their life cycle. And something that I think that will Paul and Marie, my colleague here who's in the audience, and I have spoken about on a few occasions is we've used all of the data that we've got today and can use to help us optimize. And I think we want to kind of evidence the benefit that's having by producing something akin to a comms engagement score, so we can see the positive impact that we're having and using that for future targeting as well. So that will come later. And that's it. Thanks for your time. Just wanted to say also a massive thanks to the R-Cube team for the work that they're doing for us and importantly for me anyway, the way in which it's being done. I'm really confident that a lot of my team are going to get a huge amount of benefit from this in their future careers, as I mentioned before. So thank you. A few questions before lunch, maybe, if anyone has something.
Thank you. So we're currently going through a very similar process to, I guess, what you've been through. And I think from speaking to the Cubers, they're constantly having to have these conversations in terms of we've got a huge database. We have a chief exec who's like, this message needs to go out to the whole database. Why are you only sending it? And we're constantly having to show them that if you're sending it to 500,000 people, that might not drive the same amount of clicks as if we send it to, 50,000 people. So we're running all these engagement tests at the moment to get people clicking more and moving them up the engagement pots. Was there a particular kind of test or email which has driven clicks to kind of get people moving up those engagement pots, which you'd like to share?
Oh, gosh. That's a good question. I think one thing that really springs to mind actually is, and this is coming out from Marie's team, so she's probably a lot better placed to talk about it than me, but for any Spotify subscribers, you'll know you're going to expect in your inboxes in December a wrap up of your engagement with that service, and we've started doing something similar over the last few years, and the analysis of that really shows that it has a really positive impact on a user's engagement. It's really highly personalized. We want to drive that engagement through various different cohorts of engagement, and we can see in most of those it does have a positive impact. But just having a really relentless day-to-day focus on making sure the right things going to the right people at the right time, and as to think about optimizing that volume. I don't think I can pin down any one thing in particular, but that's the thing that stands out, which is kind of maybe a little bit out of the norm that we've seen have really positive impacts. And I think you see maybe kind of, this is me saying this and we don't actually demonstrate it through doing, but every time you're sending something to someone that's less relevant, the chances that they're going to engage the next time will decrease over time. We certainly saw that in my very early days at the FT in terms of trying to convert those registered users into subscribers. We saw such sharp decline in terms of the cut through with those comms after even the second time. So you can only have people's attention for so long. So we're really mindful of that, and we've got a lot to lose. We're a premium product, and if we really piss people off through miss and over contacts, then there's a lot of value there we potentially are going to lose.
Given your length of experience in direct mail and marketing, do you think we're returning to a position where, years ago we were justifying the price of a stamp? Do you think it's getting the rigor that you had then is now being applied to email? Is that what you're saying as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're definitely, and Kate mentioned this, trying to steer the conversation away from, well, this is cheap. There is absolutely no extra cost, hardly, to messaging that bottom 20%. I think we can change up that conversation to actually you're having a really negative impact at the top in terms of those who are most engaged, is going to hopefully, I think, get some cut through in the organisation, and will definitely, email will hopefully cease to become that channel that you can just blast the base. Doesn't matter. Actually, showing it has a negative impact on those who are most likely to engage is hopefully going to scare a few people and get them to pay attention.
So you've got all that insight. You're making some changes. Stakeholders are sort of bought into the story. How do you maintain that with them going forwards? Have you got like a balanced KPI scorecard so that you can show that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I mentioned at the end in terms of that comms engagement score, we're quite, I'm not sure most businesses are, but I feel we're quite metric driven, and so building on that, I think it's going to be really important. And I think just in terms of the ways of working internally, we've in the last sort of 6 months or so have formed a contact governance forum. So that includes my head of contact governance plus all the various directors in the areas that kind of whose customers kind of form part of that combined base. And that will be a regular forum whereby we kind of this is kind of kept top of people's minds, and then it will filter down into the various team to keep iterating and experimenting and trying to optimize that framework. It's one of those things that it needs constant attention, otherwise it'll decay quite quickly.
I was just interested in the bottom 20% and your strategy going forwards with them. Are you looking to change the frequency? Are you looking at other channels? Because there's a lot of noise about SMS being, a growing channel, for example. So I was wondering, are you looking to change the media you're using?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the conversations we're having at the minute. It's definitely is a case of, not just cut them out and forget about them forever. I mentioned in terms of the change in the tech stack that we've had, we're for the FT anyway, it feels like we're moving at a relative pace in terms of integrating different channels into that stack. So on-site messaging, SMS you've mentioned, I think maybe slightly more relevant for our events business, but and then in-app capability in terms of in-app messaging and push, there'll certainly be ways in which we can try and seek to engage that other 20%, because there might be, like you say, an element of email's just not the channel for them, but there's latent opportunity in that base. So that'll be something we look at in the future, definitely. I think I was just chatting to a mentee of mine internally yesterday, and she's part of a group that we've spun up of about 15 people across tech, data, compliance, product. We've labelled them the Accelerate AI team, and I think our more there's kind of the Uber level, in terms of AI. So we've partnered with OpenAI and with Google to create tooling for employees to increase efficiencies. But from a customer-facing perspective, we're focusing in two areas within editorial. One is around content summarisation, and the second is around this is more of an internal thing, but sort of newsroom tooling. So our editor, about 18 months ago, wrote an open letter to our readers and dispelled any thoughts that might be out there that AI is going to be responsible for creating our content. We're very, very firm on that. Our content will always be written by journalists. So there is some additional caution and skepticism, but caution within our editorial team to try and make sure we don't kind of get anywhere close to that boundary. But there's definitely efficiencies that I think we can have in the newsroom in terms of creating that content, pulling it together and getting it on the website or in the paper. But that content summarisation thing is we see, I think there's a lot in there, particularly given our search capability on the site has always been kind of a bit of a bugbear for us. It could be a lot better. So, using AI to try and pull together all relevant content. We've got a huge amount of really rich metadata behind all of the content. It goes through a AI-driven tagging process before it gets published. So using that and then tying that together with search queries that users have on the site to pull together all relevant content and summarize it is, I think it's going to be a game changer for us. Thank you.